From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Camila Escalante. A rally was held in Washington, D.C. in solidarity with the Embassy Protection Collective following yesterday's release of the last 4 protectors who had been arrested for their role in defending the Venezuelan embassy. Activists gathered to condemn the violation of international law by the United States for entering the diplomatic headquarters. They maintained that an occupation by the U.S. of a foreign embassy puts all diplomatic missions at risk. Speakers also offered words of admiration for the 4 activists who stayed until the very end to do all they could to prevent their government from carrying out the illegal seizure.
No! Does Mike Pompeo speak for you? No! We have to be here because if we're not here, the U.S. corporate-owned capitalist media will tell people in Venezuela and Bolivia and throughout Latin America and even people in this country that in fact Trump and Bolton and Pompeo speak for us when in fact the opposite is the truth. U.S. imperialism is a system that dominates the world and is attempting to dominate Venezuela. They failed in their coup on January 23rd. They failed in their second coup effort on February 23rd. On April 30th, Juan Guaido tried again with a military uprising, and it failed again.
Opposition figure Carlos Vecchio and John Bolton also made an appearance.
Before my ego. Get out of my embassy.
Yeah, we know about ego.
The rally outside of the embassy soon turned into a march to the White House. Our correspondent Alina Duarte has it covered from Washington.
Thanks, good afternoon. We are at the White House in Washington, D.C. and we are with Adrienne Pine. Adrienne, she's a member of the Embassy Protection Collective. She was detained, she was released yesterday, and after this happened, why are you here, Adrienne?
I'm here because our fight is only starting. We were kicked out of the embassy, but they didn't kick us out of the struggle. Our resolve is stronger than ever before to prevent a United States coup, another United States-sponsored coup in Latin America, because we've seen what it leads to. We've seen what it leads to in Honduras, in Brazil, and we are determined to not allow it happen again.
You were saying that this is pretty similar on what happened in Honduras with the coup. Can you explain us why?
Here we go.
Well, it's different in the fact that it's failed. And it's failed, and it's failed again. And that really speaks to the will and the power of the Venezuelan people. And that was our inspiration for protecting the embassy, to ensure that it would continue failing. In Honduras, the coup succeeded because of the tremendous support that it had from the Clinton State Department, from the U.S. government. But the people who are in favor of the coup in the respective countries are the elites. They're the light-skinned, wealthy elites, a small group who want to consolidate the wealth of their countries. They want to privatize everything. They want neoliberal reforms. And frankly, culturally, they're fascists. They hate people of color. They hate, queer people. They hate women. And that comes out in their language and their epithets. And they're, it's a very dangerous thing when these people win. We've seen what it has meant in Honduras. It's meant that they basically got a murderous regime, and the people who are most disproportionately impacted by that are women, queer people, and indigenous people.
What are your next steps?
Well, my next steps are, we're glad that these charges were leveled against them, so we can have our day in court, because what the government did was absolutely illegal. Not not just by U.S. law, but violating the Vienna Convention is violating international law and putting all embassies around the world at risk. So we are excited to have the forum that the court will give us to explain to the United States people what that means, the danger that we're putting all of ourselves in by if we support Trump and Bolton and Elliott Abrams and Pompeo's coup in Venezuela.
I was listening to the Embassy Protection Collective just minutes ago. They are saying that you are going to escalate the mobilizations, these rallies, and that you will be denouncing the coup in solidarity with the people of Venezuela. What's your message to the people of Venezuela?
Our message to the people of Venezuela is that we are in full and complete solidarity with you. We share a common enemy, and that enemy is neoliberal fascism. It's dictatorship, and it's harming us in this country, and we're exporting our quote-unquote democracy around the world like this country always has done. And of course, it's no democracy. What it is violence, it's war, it's murder, it's capitalism, and it's not something that is going to help any of us. So we're in full solidarity with the Venezuelan people as they choose their own path. We should not be the ones to choose that path.
Thank you so much, Adrienne.
Thank you.
Well, we were listening to Adrienne Pine. She's a member of the Embassy Protection Collective. We will report on this and more, and back to you to the studio.
Thank you, Alina. And let's take a look at how Venezuela's new financial and commercial architecture with allied countries is working as it seeks to supply its demand for medicines and other hospital supplies. This in an effort to mitigate the effects caused by illegal sanctions and the financial blockade.
This popular pharmacy has reopened in the south of Caracas. People come with their prescriptions in order to get antibiotics, medications for hypertension, diabetes, and food supplements for pregnant women.
I've been here several times. This is the third time I've come. I've already received 3 different types of medication since they've reopened: omeprazole, atorvastatin, and now antibiotics.
There is simply not enough money for me to buy medication. It costs a lot of money, and even with my pension, it's not enough.
More than 15,000 people have received free medicine in almost 2 months of operation. Economic sanctions have directly influenced Venezuela's ability to guarantee healthcare as a social right to citizens. This has negatively impacted millions of people here in Venezuela. According to data from the Pan American Health Organization, up until 2016, Venezuela had improved all of its health indicators, including vaccination plans and access to medical care. The Bolivarian Republic also reduced the prevalence of diseases.
A country in economic crisis is one with fewer resources, and those resources are not sufficient to cover the hospital's demands. When you don't have sufficient medicines, when you don't have enough supplies, operating problems at the hospital are exacerbated. In an economic crisis, people are more vulnerable because they do not eat what they are supposed to eat. They get weaker, lose weight, hygiene norms have changed. Issues with the water supply and electrical problems also become more aggravated.
Russia delivered 7.5 tons of medicine to Venezuela on February 21, 2019. To remedy this critical situation, on March 29th, 65 tons arrived from China, and on April 16th, 24 tons from the International Red Cross. According to data from the Health Ministry, Venezuela approved the more than €600 million investment in medicines.
In addition to this commercial agreement for the purchase of supplies, medicines, and surgical equipment, they are making donations through the Humanitarian Technical Assistance Program.
The medicines are stored in this automated warehouse where they store generic medicines from the list of essential drugs.
The storing of medicines at the facility is guided by the Minister of Health and not by a commercial need.
The distribution of medicines to the national public health sector via integral diagnostic centers, hospitals, and social security institutions is controlled and monitored from this room. The objective is to standardize the access and availability of medicines for the Venezuelan people.
FARC leader and key figure in Colombia's peace process, Jesus Santrich, has suffered cardiopulmonary arrest following Friday's release from prison, a release that was immediately followed by another arrest. Our correspondent in Bogota, Tatiana Portela, reports that Jesus Santrich is under intensive care at Clínica Medellín. This after his health worsened and because he did not receive specialized care while at the prosecutor's office. His lawyers and private doctors indicate that Sandino has been provided with medication. The New York Times published an article on the Colombian government's selective assassination policy, ordered by the Army Chief Commander Nicasio Martinez Espinel and under the policies of President Ivan Duque. Our correspondent Tatiana Portela has more.
The New York Times today reported that the democratic security policy, led by former Colombian President Álvaro Uribe Vélez, is back again, with one of the worst extrajudicial execution cases known. The newspaper also reported that there are written and oral orders for the army to capture and murder alleged criminal armed groups. But in this case, they are requested to ensure efficiency so that it does not fail and harm civilians. Opposition senators in a statement demanded reversal of General Nicasio Martinez's recent promotion. They demanded that this promotion be stopped because he is currently being investigated for many other extrajudicial execution cases. A few days ago, Dimar Torres, a former combatant, was killed by National Army forces in the north of Santander region. This was revealed through a video captured by citizens, where it emerged that the army captured, tortured, and murdered him. Community recorded all that took place. His body was later found with injuries and gunshot wounds. Even the general who was part of the Catatumbo troop asked for forgiveness from the community, but it is understood the defense minister, Guillermo Botero, was not happy about his actions and fired him from his position. Meanwhile, the Colombian Justice Commission is headed to Cauca Valley region to find out how another former combatant, Wilson Saavedra, was also murdered in circumstances which are still unclear. He was allegedly shot by two people when he was having lunch in a restaurant. He was rushed to the hospital where he later died. Analysts are asking if the new Duque government will continue with the security policies of former President Uribe, and if so, how this could result in more extrajudicial executions. Journalists and opposition figures say that here there are many crimes being committed against humanity, which are being carried out by the Colombian government to guarantee results for its operations. And there are questions as to whether this is related to the murders of social leaders and former combatants. Since 2016, 500 lives have been taken, and in 2019 alone, 113 former combatants have been murdered. These cases have yet to be thoroughly investigated. This is how the New York Times report reopens extrajudicial executions being sponsored by Duque's government and military forces.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again in a minute. Bolivia's movement towards socialism party, the party of President Evo Morales, launched its campaign for the upcoming October elections in Cochabamba. The launch was an interreligious ceremony which began with an Andean ritual during which an offering was made to the earth and to Andean deities to ask for protection and blessings for the candidates. President Evo Morales is running for re-election alongside Vice President Álvaro García Linera.
We are from the indigenous campesino autonomous Rurai Pampa government, and we are present here today for this event to mark the start of the campaign of our comrade Evo. We are present here because throughout all of these years of management, laws and regulations have been created which support women. And so we want these measures to continue, and that's why our community is here.
Our correspondent in La Paz, Freddy Morales, has the details.
President Evo Morales launched his re-election campaign today at Chimoré Airport in the Chapare region as a symbolic act of the changes achieved during his 13 years in power. This airport used to be part of a US military base where not even the highest Bolivian authorities could enter without authorization from the US Embassy. This was when the Drug Enforcement Agency, the DEA, ruled over the region and the rest of the country with their plan to eradicate coca plantations in the Cochabamba area, and when the campesinos defended their crops at a high social cost due to the violence. Chimoré is now an international airport that promotes tourism in the region, and the DEA has been expelled since 2009 due to their interference in internal affairs. The government affirms that now, without the DEA, the fight against drug trafficking is more successful and a model for other countries since Evo Morales assumed power in 2006. Then, there was around 30,000 hectares of coca plantations. Today, without the DEA, there are around 24,000 hectares, from which 20,000 for legal traditional use. This morning, together on a motorcycle, President Evo Morales and Vice President Alvaro Garcia Linera arrived at the airport where the mass campaign was launched. Hundreds of thousands of supporters of the movement towards socialism arrived in support of the government. President Evo Morales rose to power after winning presidential elections in December 2005 with 53.7% of the vote. A historic result in Bolivia because before, those with the most votes wouldn't achieve more than 30%. And candidates had to form alliances to govern. In 2009, Morales got more than 64% of votes, and in 2014, for next October, Morales says he is confident that he will exceed those numbers. The popularity of the indigenous president is sustained by the alliance he makes with social movements, including the Bolivian labor movement, and a successful project called the Democratic and Cultural Revolution. This began with the nationalization of natural resources such as hydrocarbons that has given the country this economic and political power, turning it into one of the fastest growing economies in the continent in the last 5 years. With a program of industrialization also launching, 8 candidates will participate in the elections taking place on October the 20th, 2019.
Nicaragua is celebrating 124 years since the birth of the General of Free Men and Women, Augusto Cesar Sandino. Sandino was a Nicaraguan revolutionary, the leader of the resistance against the U.S. military occupation of Nicaragua in the 1930s. Sandino fought for the sovereignty of the country, and from Sandino, the governing Sandinista National Liberation Front derived its name. Commemorative activities were held all across the country, with President Daniel Ortega and Vice President Rosario Murillo presiding over an official event, in which the general was remembered, and during which the army and police were honored for their role in defending the Nicaraguan people's struggles.
The comrades who are here today, like always, the police and the army is at the hand of the people, at the service of the workers, at the service of the campesinos, at the service of the young, at the service of producers, at the hands of all economic and social sectors of our country, to provide them security and peace. They are in the defense of the sovereignty of the country. That is fundamental. And defending the sovereignty of the country, we are defending conditions to allow us to continue the battle against poverty, the battle against exclusion, the battle against rights which had been taken from the people, the right to health, the right to education.
Now to Argentina, where Senator Cristina Fernández de Kirchner has officially announced that she will be candidate to the vice presidency on a ticket headed by Alberto Fernández. The decision was announced through a video in which she spoke to the people of Argentina, expressing that these dramatic times require a new national unity. Alberto Fernández, who was a candidate for the presidency by the Citizens Unity Party, was chief of cabinet under Nestor Kirchner and Cristina Fernández governments. The former president assured that despite the differences, Alberto Fernández is a man decided to organize, agree, and always look for the largest possible breadth. Germany will pay compensation to the victims of the former Nazi pedophile sect Colonia Dignidad, located in Chile. The victims will receive $11,000 each. The sect was created by Nazi Paul Schaefer in 1961 in Linares province. The location was presented as a residential family area, but it hid slavery, torture, and sexual abuse of children. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. The United Nations has issued a warning about the imminence of a humanitarian crisis in drought-stricken Somalia. Drought has left nearly 2 million Somalis in desperate need of food due to scarce rainfall. The UN estimates that almost 2 million people are going hungry, with that figure expected to grow by another 500,000 come July. Several thousand Somalis have already left their homes in rural areas for urban centers this year alone, joining millions of internally displaced people across the country. Somalia is enduring its third driest rain season since 1981.
The situation in Somalia is very worrying. We're just 2 years on from the 2017 drought, which had a famine warning to it. We were able to avoid famine through working with partners, government, civil society, the diaspora, private sector. It really was a collective effort.
Political parties in Malawi organized rallies on Saturday, the last day of campaigning before the general elections on May 21st. More than 6 million voters will be turning out to elect the next president and members of the parliament. The current president, Peter Mutharika, will be seeking a second presidential term and is being challenged by his former vice president, who formed his own political party. Malawi's ruling Democratic Progressive Party has vowed to tackle poverty and corruption.
They are to assure Malawians that more than ever we'll do more in the next 5 years than we did the last 5 years. We are ready to renew our fight on hunger, our war on youth unemployment, war on disease, ignorance, and corruption.
Just over 2 months after Cyclone Idai hit Mozambique, displacing over 1,000 people and destroying a number of towns and villages, restoration efforts continue. Our correspondent Andre Vieira traveled to Mozambique along with Cuban medical personnel who were there to help those affected by the storm. He has more details in this report.
We are in the city of Beira, in Mozambique, with the Henry Reed Brigade, made up of Cuban medical personnel, who have been working here for 48 days to provide healthcare to the victims of Storm Idai. These Cuban doctors have treated more than 20,000 people and have performed around 300 surgeries. They are also treating people who come in on a daily basis to this place, which is functioning as a hospital. Citizens tell us they are glad for the aid being offered. We also spoke to the Cuban doctors who have been around the world performing similar humanitarian acts, and they said that they have not only brought healthcare, but also happiness and smiles to those affected by Idai.
China has described a move by the United States to ban Huawei as a violation of fair competition. The Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Liu Kang said such a move by the U.S. is against the interests of all countries and against the trend of economic globalization. The U.S. Department of Commerce announced the restriction of the sale of transfer of American technologies to Huawei on Wednesday. Meanwhile, other countries won't be taking part in any restriction of Huawei, thereby isolating the United States in its decision.
In today's globalized world, the development and utilization of 5G as well as cooperation on 5G network depend on exchanges among countries around the world. The United States' interference with 5G development, utilization and cooperation out of political purposes, abuse of national security standards, politicizing related issues, and adopting restrictions to suppress targeted companies are not conducive to 5G network development and also violates the principle of fair competition. Frankly speaking, such moves are against the interest of all countries.
Yellow vest protesters demonstrated in Paris on Saturday, marking 6 months since the beginning of their movement against the policies of President Emmanuel Macron. The French president said last week that he has done his part to respond to their grievances. However, the yellow vest protesters condemned his statement, saying that their main demand, which is calling for a citizens' initiative referendum, has not been granted, and neither have many of their other demands. Protesters have urged the public to vote against Macron's party at the upcoming elections.
You are telling me he has responded to Yellow Vest demands. He has responded to none of them, the most simple one being the citizen initiative referendum. It was pushed back, as well as the re-evaluation of salaries, the people's interest to participate more significantly in governance, and the fact of putting a stop to price hikes, and to giving back the purchasing power, even to stop privatization.
In another protest, hundreds of people gathered in Paris to take part in a global demonstration against agricultural company Monsanto. The protests come after an international outcry over the company's genetically modified seeds and toxic chemicals, which are regarded as toxic to the environment and damaging to public health. Thousands of people have marched in Chile in support of marijuana legalization. Chileans demonstrated in Santiago on Saturday in support of loosening restrictions on marijuana use. Protesters are calling for the government to allow recreational use of marijuana. In 2015, Chile legalized the use of medical marijuana following a wave of other Latin American nations that are slowly moving towards legalization of the cultivation, distribution, and consumption of cannabis.
We don't want more prisoners because of a plant. We've got a system where you can spend more time in jail for marijuana possession than a thief or a murder. Today, there is a law for medicinal cannabis which is allegedly respected, but you can still be taken to jail.
We come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at tellusorenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Our English, I'm Camila Escalante. Thanks for watching.